One of your biggest failures is abandoning your own truth and authenticity. Why do you believe that was such a big failure? And why do you now see the cost of that being so high for you?
The not looking at it, the not having awareness for it was what created the cost. Damage to my health, overweight, addictive patterns with regard to alcohol, for example, substances, porn, hurtful behavior towards people very close to me. Most of the issues rooted in a wrong assumption, which is freedom, peace, joy, things to be attained in the future. It makes sense to sacrifice them in the now to have them later. That very assumption leads to the acceptance of, let's say, why I'm looking for freedom, I might accept a prison because it will eventually get me the freedom.
What's right in front of you that is demanding your attention? If we don't seek to jump steps, if we don't try to take the 20th step before we take the first step, there is an unfolding process that occurs.
Where do I not feel peaceful? Where do I not feel ease? Where do I feel contracted? What is just a pure energy drain whenever I do it? I would highly recommend to not try to solve this purpose challenge or like finding second mountain mind-based. The truth is in the fucking body. That's where it is. What if any conversation I have during a day will be the last time I spoke to that person? Have I shared everything I wanted to share? Have I felt the heart of the other person? Have I opened my own heart to the other person?
Each moment can be purposeful. How would I act? How would I speak? How would I love my partner? How would I be with my parents if this was my last fucking day? Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. What does it take for a founder to return to what is real, aligned, and alive in him, instead of chasing the success, admiration, or freedom he hopes will finally make him feel enough and feel at peace in his life? Welcome back to the final episode of the Founder Series, a 6-part journey supporting founders, business professionals, and high-performing men who want to evolve from high-functioning stress into embodied and integrated leadership, a form of leadership that allows you to stay clear and calm under pressure by aligning who you are with how you lead. Within the world of founders and entrepreneurs, many of the men I work with have climbed what we would describe as their first mountain. They pursued external success, achieved milestones, and reached the very things our culture rewards. Yet somewhere along the way, a humbling truth emerges. The freedom, love, approval, or peace they hope to feel doesn't last, and they find themselves standing with everything they once wanted, yet feeling empty or restless inside. This is the moment they arrive at a crossroads. The old strategies no longer work, yet the clarity or direction about how to climb their second mountain has not arrived. A mountain that's more closely connected to their deeper nature, guided by what feels alive and aligned, offering a far more sustainable way to experience fulfillment than the achievement-driven path that came before. In this conversation, Bjoern and I explore this crossroads in a grounded, practical way, highlighting the space between the life a man has built and the life he actually wants. Drawing from Bjoern's experience as a founder, we speak about why external achievements alone cannot create the inner fulfillment so many men quietly hope for. We unpack the patterns that keep founders stuck on the first mountain and the common pitfalls men encounter when they begin searching for a deeper purpose. From there, we explore what it looks like to move toward a sense of purpose in a clear and embodied way. How to make decisions guided by your inner knowing rather than by what simply makes sense from the outside. And how to follow what is true and aligned instead of letting our fears dictate the path. We also look at how our relationship to death can clarify what genuinely matters to us and how this awareness helps us live with greater intention in the choices we make each day. At its core, this episode offers a clear, grounded pathway for founders who reached or pursued success, yet still feel a restlessness inside. A pathway toward building a life that feels meaningful, guided by authentic expression rather than performance or proving oneself. A form of leadership rooted in inner alignment, presence, and truth. If you're a man who's tired of working harder at the things that no longer work, who feels something deeper calling you forward, or who wants clarity on the next chapter of your life, I trust that this episode will meet you where you are. Bjoern, my friend, I'm super excited for our final conversation in this founder series. This is a conversation that is very dear to my heart and one that I've been reflecting on for, I'm going to say, over a decade now. And I also believe that this conversation here is going to be incredibly valuable for founders. And it's going to be all around this idea of purpose and all about finding our own unique path in the world. And the way I want to frame this conversation is loosely based on a framework that was brought out in a book called The Second Mountain by an author called David Brooks. For me, I believe this is the closest framework that I perceive will probably connect to any founder's experience, which follows somewhat of an idea that the first mountain is the one that we follow because it's the conventional path. It's the one that we've been told will provide us a certain level of value, a certain level of approval, a certain level of love or connection. What I observe with a lot of founders that I work with, often it roots back to some form of wound that they might have experienced. For yourself, it was feeling a lack of freedom in your life, feeling like life is a burden, that you can't really be yourself. And that triggers this response, this protective response in the nervous system, where we ask ourselves, what do I need to do? Who do I need to be? And I observe we create this arrival fallacy where it's like, if I do this, if I become successful, then I'll be free. If I do this, then I will be loved. And we follow that. And for many, of course, this is not true for every founder. I want to preface that, but it's true for many founders. And then we run with it and we follow that until there comes a time when we have all the things that we said we wanted. And then we realize, why is it not providing me the very thing that I wanted? Why do I still not feel free? Why do I still feel restless? Why do I still feel this level of agitation? And I think it is there where a man begins to, or an individual per se, looks closer and starts to look at, where was I coming from when I created this? And that starts to direct us towards the second mountain. And the way I see it is, it's a mountain that we climb more connected towards our truer expression, authentic expression. And it's more connected to who we are, our innate gifts, maybe some of the wounds that we have experienced. And as a result, the ways that we might want to support other individuals out of our compassion, out of love, and how we want to be of service. So that is a bit of a preface of this framework. And this is, I guess, as well, the journey that I would like to take us on in this conversation here, using very much your experiences, because I feel like you have the poster experience of a founder who went through such a journey. And of course, I will bring in as well my reflections in terms of my work as a coach, but then as well the experiences I've had working with other founders on this topic. So that's the preface on all of this. Where I would like to begin is, in the past, I heard you mention that one of your biggest failures is abandoning your own truth and authenticity. And I wanted to hear from you to begin. Why do you believe that was such a big failure? And why do you now see the cost of that being so high for you?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't necessarily call it a failure. Because a failure is, from my point of view, failure can happen when I actually try to do or achieve something, and then there's a risk that I don't do it. If I have no awareness around, let's say if my goal would have been to live my truth and my most authentic self, then I didn't do it, then that I would consider as a failure. My challenge was that simply I had no awareness around, okay, what is my truth? I was simply not looking at it. And that is actually because you asked about the cost. So I needed to say that first to get to the cost of it, because the not looking at it, the not having awareness for it, was what created the cost, right? Because in my nature, I'm like, when I know something and have clarity, I might fail on the way there, but whenever I fail, I adapt. So that ultimately there is no failure, because I'm constantly adapting to find a new strategy to continue going that way. So there are like micro failures, but there's not that big failure. At least the way that I operate in the world. So now, not having the awareness for what is my truth and what is my most authentic self, that created the cost. And the cost was, let's say, a really diminished experience of life, especially of the fullness of life. A lack of joy, a lack of peace, a very big lack of peace, actually. Joy was there sometimes, but like a big lack of peace and calmness. It's definitely also damage to my health, overweight, addictive patterns with regard to alcohol, for example, substances, porn, whatever, hurtful behavior towards people very close to me. And ultimately a not fulfilled, not peaceful, feeling depressed, kind of like feeling state, so to say. Yeah, that was a cost.
Beautiful. And, for the sake as well of our conversation, I really want to as well not go into the details of your story. And for anyone who as well wants to hear those, I really encourage you to as well check out our first conversation where we really went into full depth of that experience that you went through. I want to double down on some of the costs that you'd communicated, and knowing you as well very closely by now, what I consider is that it seems that the first decade of being an entrepreneur, perhaps even more, you were pursuing the sense of freedom. However, what you were creating was, perhaps unbeknownst to you at the time, was this prison that you couldn't escape out of. And this is something that I observe a lot of founders experiencing. They might not use that language, but it's like the structures that they create, it's almost like something that they can't get themselves out of anymore. And I want to hear a little bit more about what that looked like for you, and why were you not able to as well receive the very things that you were looking for, such as freedom or inner peace?
I'd say most of the issues, let's say, rooted in a wrong assumption, which is freedom, peace, joy are things to be attained in the future. And it makes sense to sacrifice them in the now to have them later. That very assumption leads to the acceptance of, let's say, while I'm looking for freedom, I might accept a prison because it will eventually get me the freedom. While that, let's say, might work for, let's say, a short period of time, a month, maybe a year, whatever, right? It can work out. It's definitely something that, from my point of view, a human system can't sustain for very long, and a decade is way too long. So maybe human system can sustain that for a certain period of time, short period of time, but not for a decade or like even multiple decades, because it is basically then a system in which, like, or the way that I had arranged my life and my life circumstances were such that I wasn't able to strive in them. And if a system is not able to thrive and is not fueled by what it's busy with every day, it will lead to all the experiences that I had. So it's really this wrong assumption around like, yeah, that's in the future, and in order to get there, I'm ready to give up on it. This simply doesn't work.
I like that. And I guess what stands out as well for me with a lot of individuals that I work with is that with anything that they're attempting to attain in the future, if you just dig in a little bit further, usually there's some form of feeling state that that thing that they're attempting to acquire is connected to. And through the attempt of getting that in the future, they're constantly reinforcing that they can't have it today. Yeah. And unbeknownst to them as well, they're denying themselves that very thing today, right? You know, for yourself, it was freedom, right? Inner peace, because you decided, oh, okay, I can have this ultimate freedom. I can have this ultimate peace in the future if I just achieve and acquire all those things. And I consider, like anything in life, it's a practice. Yeah. We practice a certain way of being. The more we practice that state of being, the more it becomes habituated. You know, initially it might be a state that we just prime ourselves in, but then eventually it becomes a trait, and it actually becomes a deeply rooted part of our personality that we have incredible difficulties to actually get out of. This is actually as well one of the costs that I see. If you prime yourself for 10 years to not be in the moment, to not be present, to always be thinking, what is the ROI? What am I getting out of this? This is not worth my time. Then it's going to be really difficult to actually allow ourselves to rest here right now, to allow ourselves just to be, because we don't see the value in it. We're like, what's the point? I think that is a big difficulty I see with a lot of individuals.
Agree. That's definitely been the case for me. 100%.
Other thing that as well stands out for me is just the question around where are we coming from? Meaning, what is the fuel that we're using? Yeah. And would love to hear what perhaps stood out for you when you think about it. But I see that with a lot of individuals, it can be this sense of like unworthiness. That was my thing. It was just like, I need to prove my worthiness, my value in the world. I feel insignificant, like I'm a nobody. I want to become significant. Yeah. And it was this, it's a powerful fuel, but it's also a very expensive fuel. And even when I was getting the things that I was wanting, I noticed it would never last, because the very fuel that I was using and the very place that I was driven by was that sense of unworthiness. So even if I get there, I don't actually like fully take it in, because whom I see myself to be is not valuable, right? So we can like build this incredible business, but it's like we can't take it on because, you know, our value is geared by our performance, by our doing, by our accomplishments. And so we need to go to the next thing.
That's an interesting one, at least in my case, because it didn't take me very long to the moment I got what I wanted to stop doing that shit. So in a certain way, one,
I think you're different in that.
Exactly. In a certain way, one can look at how my life has unfolded and say, like, yes, the very thing that I wanted was to be authentic, live my truth, and, you know, be free. I delayed that for more than a decade and paid a price for it. But then the moment I got what I wanted, which was financial freedom, I dropped all that shit. Like, obviously, like there was a little bit of a transition period, you know, where I was still doing some work and this and that, and so there was still some attachment to that image. But like in a very short period of time, I dropped that, and I stopped doing that. My life today is by 180 degrees different to what it was while I was still doing all that work stuff. And a big part is because I've gone through like, spiritual personal development stuff and had insights and realized a few things. And a big part is also, I got what I wanted. And I can really clearly say that. One could look at, let's say, my path and say, yeah, there's a big attachment like to money, and then there's like self-worth defined by the amount of money and success of the company and these type of things. There could be an easy assumption, but then if one would then investigate and see what I have done over the past 2 years, that wouldn't make any sense. Because what one would see is that basically any funds that are beyond that, what I need to live a comfortable but not, let's say, luxurious life, I've just given it away, more or less, and everyone that I am invested in will confirm that I am probably the most unattached investor they have in their fucking cap table. So that's clearly not true for me. So it's interesting, and I have to say that I don't have, let's say, full clarity around it. By now, the best answer I can give is I had some insights and realization that there's more to life that actually connected me with something that I could call a purpose. And I really want to also own that. For me, it was very easy for me to give up running after the thing that I was running after the moment I had it.
I'm glad that you say that, because first of all, I didn't know that. And I really do not want to take your experience as the norm, because it's not. I've worked with enough founders, I've worked with enough individuals who have perhaps not gained the level of success that you've had, but reasonable success where they logically can say, hey, I don't need to work anymore. I don't need to keep driving this. I don't need to do this thing. But they find themselves in a place of agitation around it. As Bjoern and I recorded this founder series, one thing became clear. Founders and high-performing men are hungry for a place where they can speak honestly, develop emotional leadership, and be supported by people who understand the pressures they live with. With that in mind, we're opening a small and intimate cohort beginning February 2026 for founders, business professionals, and leaders who want to apply the principles we explore in the series to their lives so they can lead with clarity, emotional steadiness, and integrity, even in high-pressure situations. Now, this is not a large program. It is a focused space where members receive personal mentorship from both of us. Bjoern brings more than 15 years of entrepreneurial experience, investing and advising founders, grounded in years of Zen meditation. My background in embodied coaching, somatic work, and teaching over the past decade helps men reconnect to themselves, regulate under pressure, and lead from a grounded and aligned place. When we tested this approach with a group of founders in Berlin, the response was clear. Men felt supported not just in their business challenges, but in their relationships, emotional life, and inner world. Each month, we will meet for a 3-hour session combining coaching, mentorship, and guided embodiment work. The aim is simple: to help you stay grounded, connected, and clear in the areas that matter most. This cohort is designed for founders and leaders who want to move beyond high-functioning stress, lead their business, relationships, and live in an embodied and integrated way, build a life that feels aligned rather than reactive. You'll be supported by people who understand what you carry and who can help you lead from your core instead of from pressure. If this is the kind of guidance and structure you desire, you'll find a link to join in the show notes. Because they're like, I know this is not giving me the thing that I'm wanting, or I'm not fully satisfied anymore. And they might realize, hey, something needs to change perhaps, but they don't know where to go.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and maybe we can I should say one last thing around my story, and then we maybe move to more broader topics. But and you know me, right? I consider myself being quite empathetic and also having compassion for individuals. It's really difficult for me to have compassion with someone that is fucking rich and complains about his job. And then dude, just drop it. Just drop the shit. If it doesn't fulfill, just expand on that. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
because, and that's my own story, right? Because I'm projecting on them, but I'm like, I was unhappy, or let's say not fulfilled, not at peace, blah, 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 in prison in my entrepreneurial journey. And I did that in order to achieve financial freedom. The moment I had financial freedom, I started to transition out of that world. I basically dropped that world completely. And I never ever want to be in, let's say, in a situation where I spend a significant amount of my energy that I have on a day into something that I constantly complain about for like years. It's always a bad day for whatever I do there. There's a day where I don't want to do it, and the next day I come back and do it, right? But constant complaining over a long period of time, sacrificing health and peace and fulfillment, while just increasing the numbers on my bank account. I have very little compassion. And like, if I see someone doing that, and then seeking fire, just stop that shit, man. Like, where's the problem? And that is, I mean, I want to own that. This is just a projection of, let's say, the way I operate on them. And I understand there are like powerful dynamics at play that say, that make these individuals do that. Just noticing in myself, it's hard for me I don't get it. I can't connect to that.
Right. Well, I guess what I want to reflect to you, as well, from my lens as a coach, it seems like the protectors that had brought you to the place that you were at, as soon as you realized, hey, this is not going to get me to the ultimate stage, or I have what I needed from there, it seems like they had this deep capacity just to soften back. And it seems like maybe this was different. Maybe this was the case for you, but it seems like your worth wasn't so connected to this idea of being a founder, or this idea of,
Completely not.
Yeah. And I think this is where it gets sticky. This is where it gets really sticky for people, when their sense of self-worth or their identity or their value is really connected to that. And this is where I see many founders actually get stuck. Those are the ones where they really struggle to transition. Or as well, when they had come from, let's just say, poverty, and they literally experienced the level of unsafety in their lives, and to just stop working, even if they, like, logically they understand, I have a lot of money, I don't need to worry about money, it is a threat to their nervous system. Yeah. So, I've been in sessions with these guys, and I do carry compassion, for the recognition that there's aspects of them at play that are a lot younger, that are just trying to keep them safe.
Interesting. Kind of was a little bit of a life reflection here, since, from what you were sharing, and then, like you said, like reflecting on my own journey. I was like, yeah, it's interesting.
I hear you, man. And, I mean, we're very close friends, and like, honor what a depth you have, especially in your spiritual practice. But I would say as well, you're psychologically and spiritually very mature, and I mean, we can argue various reasons why that might be. I think that's probably not so valuable to explore that within this conversation.
Totally. I mean, one last thing, like, one could also argue that, like, I just, the moment I realized, like, the thing won't get me what I want, it shifted to something else. And I, in a certain way, replaced then, let's say, running my business with spiritual practice, because I know I'm going to find it there. And then I had to, and actually, it's actually true that I also had to learn that I can't do spiritual practice the same way I did business. So I had to learn to do this in a healthy way, right? So that's also something to be aware of.
Definitely want to go back to that. And so, considering that you might not be able to relate to the experience so much, I do want to just explore this then more from a global perspective of some of the challenges that founders might have on this experience. And, perhaps not the ones that you can relate to directly, but perhaps what you'd observed with some of the individuals who are struggling to step out of that first mountain. So, to kind of go back to the arc where we're at, it's like they've built that first mountain. They're complete on that. They're super clear. Hey, like, this is not working anymore. Something needs to change. And I see a really pivotal moment for a lot of guys is the void. The void where they're clear, hey, the old way is no longer working, but they have no clarity of the new way yet. Yeah, they have no frame of mind. And all they realize is that the old fuel that they might have used, whether it was approval gaining, validation, being driven by that doer in them and consistently pursuing a level of strong performance, it's just not getting them to where they want to be. And I noticed that for a lot of men, that can be a very anxiety inducing place to be with a lot of uncertainty. And, this is also where I see a lot of coping mechanisms can come alive. Distractions, making ourselves even more busy, not wanting to look at that. Because I think it's incredibly vulnerable for a man to not actually have a direction anymore. When we've had a direction our whole lives, and because this is what I hear from a lot of guys. When I know where I'm going, I just fucking go. But it's like when I don't know, it's incredibly vulnerable for them. We're like, I feel stuck. I don't know what to do. Have you observed that with some founders? Have you observed that among some people? And
Yeah.
what do you see there?
I've definitely observed that. Yeah, I've definitely observed that, and I can relate partially to that. Like when I have a direction and when I have clarity, then I move, and then I enjoy freedom from that. Actually, the void is something where I feel very free, and I enjoy like blank sheet of paper, just design everything new and give it a new try. And like that's for me, it's a quite enjoyable state actually. It always has been. It's always been an enjoyable state for me. When like a chapter was closed, a new chapter opened, that phase of where I was completely unclear what the next chapter is going to be like, that's a nice state. I really enjoy that. And when I have clarity, and then in that state, I'm not very powerful. Yeah. Like I'm there looking at things, but I'm not really going to distractions, like just leaving things open, taking a look here, taking a look there, taking my time. But I really enjoy it, not stressing me. And I'm not fully bringing my power. Then when I have clarity, know what I'm doing, know what I want to build, then when my power comes out. But I really enjoy the state of like freedom, of not having the clarity. It can be really nice. And it's not my most powerful expression. So that's both is true. And then, yes, I've seen, especially also younger founders, that, let's say, have built a business and didn't work out and don't tap into that void because first business plan didn't work out, and then maybe also realized that it wasn't like really connected to their core, and then that I have observed. And definitely I've also observed, like, say, the individuals who have been entrepreneurs for decades and then sold their company and suddenly sit on a bunch of cash and don't know what to do with their life anymore. Definitely seen that a lot. And also seen how that can be stressful. Again, hard for me to relate, but I've definitely seen it. And to be honest, I think there are great tools and practices and ways how to actually enjoy these states. And I mean, come on, it's like most people like dream all of their fucking life to get to a place where they like don't have to go to work anymore, right? I would encourage everyone to do the work to be able to enjoy these states because it's pretty cool. But it might require some work. You might have to work with a coach. You might have to do a couple of things for that.
Well, I would say that is definitely one of the elements that I would want to encourage, and I want to explore that a little bit more. Once we kind of accept that we're in the void, I think that's the first step. We just got to accept, okay, we're in this. Like we're in a place of uncertainty, and we just don't know the path ahead. And I think the biggest thing that we just got to do is we got to just embrace it.
Yeah.
We just got to own it. We got to learn to work with it and find some answers. Get curious about it.
Yeah.
Right. I guess before we go there and before we go to the place of what you believe could be useful, or what I as well believe could be useful, to get clarity on this journey, I do want to explore and I want to highlight some of the pitfalls that I believe some founders can get stuck in, because I think there's quite a few. Before I share mine, I would like to just maybe hear from you. What do you believe are some of the pitfalls that you see coming up for founders when they're in this void and they're like trying to find an answer, and it just seems like what they're doing is actually taking them further away from what they're actually being called to do.
Yeah, I would say like one big thing that I see is choosing not giving that enough space and time, that void, and then picking something that is maybe not fully aligned with them, just to not having to be in that void anymore. So that something definitely happens, and then choose something that is like only a 70% fit.
An unwillingness to sit with the discomfort of acting too soon.
Yeah, exactly. Then choosing something that is not a perfect fit. That's definitely there. And I would probably say that's the biggest thing. Let me see what else. When I've seen people getting lost in their search for their fucking purpose, because then that's like, oh, there's the void, and then okay, what do I do now? Let's start looking for my purpose, and then there's like so many beautiful offerings like that will help you find your purpose. You can just completely lost in finding the purpose.
And it's interesting. I like what you're saying, because it's almost like they're projecting the same ways of grinding, hustling in the business world onto now personal growth and personal development. And just doing all of that now. So I think that's also something we got to be super cautious of. The question is always, where am I coming from as I'm doing something? If you're still pursuing the old way energetically in the way that you're showing up, it won't actually truly create the transformation that you might be internally looking for.
Yeah, I agree. Then another thing is like, what I hear often is I'm afraid to choose something because maybe that's not my purpose. And then there's like, there's this constant anxiety of like, what if I haven't chosen the right thing? Anyways. That's there as well. This maybe
the younger part of me can relate to that a little bit. I mean, today the part of me is like, but we can explore that a little bit.
So these are probably the top 3. Okay. And then one can get lost in like very surface level things that maybe are not the fullest expression of the depth that is available. So they say excessive sport, for example. Like, nothing wrong about the goal of having a 6-pack or anything like that, but it's like, usually there's more depth than that available.
Few things that come up for me as well that might as well be different in terms of what you said. I see a lot of guys, first of all, getting themselves busy because they're super uncomfortable with not knowing the path ahead. So, it could be doing more of what they already know. It could be just going with the next new business idea and then running that same energy that with which they built the first company just on something new. And they just hope that the new idea will actually give them the satisfaction that they're looking for. And so that's just something to be cautious of. And of course, like, wanting to numb that feeling in some ways. This might be through addictions. This might be drugs, alcohol, porn, sex. Just making ourselves super busy. I think that's a common one that I observe with a lot of individuals. Something as well that I really like to as well communicate is this idea that we're coming into an ending. We're coming into a closing of a certain chapter. And I would say any closing, any ending will require a process of grief. There is a certain death process that occurs. And here, I just see that it's a very difficult thing for a lot of men to step into. The death of an old way of being. The death of who they used to be. The death of perhaps certain protectors that had really kept them safe and supported them to be who they are today, but are no longer needed. Like, I've as well been in coaching sessions with my coaches where it's been super vulnerable for me to realize, oh shit, that perfectionist in me, that high performer in me that was so driven to ensure that eventually I get to the places where I hope to get, those parts of me had to realize your job, it won't work. And that can be a super devastating process. For me, it was like heartbreak. It was a heartbreak of a dream, the heartbreak of um, something not coming alive that I really wanted, you know? And it is very connected as well to those initial moments where we might have experienced a certain level of pain, where we didn't feel loved, where we didn't feel worthy, where we didn't feel safe. And all of a sudden, we come into contact with those parts, that those protectors, those high achievers in us, those perfectionists in us, those lone wolves in us that they were trying to protect. And I think it's an important and also a really beautiful process to actually come into contact with those. But that also requires us to have the structures in place so we can actually grieve. Of course, working with a practitioner, facilitator, or coach is very useful in that matter. Um, so I would say that. And yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say as well on that is what makes it so difficult for a lot of founders is the restlessness that can occur, right? Because all of a sudden they're not doing, and if they're not doing, what keeps them safe? What continues to make them feel valuable? And it's almost like they have to sit in the discomfort of the nervous system imprint of I don't feel safe, I don't feel worthy. And they actually have to learn to acclimate to that and to be with that. And I've literally observed guys like just not being able to do that and then just going to the next thing. So those are some of the pitfalls that I see.
Definitely seen that as well.
Yeah. Anything you have to add in terms of what I shared or anything that stood out for you?
No, seems pretty complete to me.
So for anyone who's listening in, for anyone who might have already built this first mountain or is even on the first mountain right now and it's clear, hey, I don't want to continue on this rat race. I actually want to follow something deeper, something more true, something more aligned, something more authentic. Where would you encourage someone to start? Where would you encourage them to, I guess, bring awareness to the places where they had come from, who they'd been, and how they can step into a truer way of being?
Before we go there, there's just one thing that came up when you mentioned maybe individuals who are starting to have some awareness, but are still kind of like building the first mountain. Yeah. I have observed in let's call it personal development purpose world, a very, very radical approach at times, which is like, don't do anything that's not aligned with your purpose. And then things are dropped, and then like suddenly there's this idea for this purpose, and then like everything else is dropped, and then someone starts building whatever it is that their new purpose is, right? And they have just burnt bridges with the old, and I've seen that. I believe it's valuable to explore options and to see, okay, maybe, and like, because the moment I have awareness, like, oh, what I'm doing is maybe not exactly aligned with what I really want to be doing, but it can be worthwhile to explore. Can I build a connection of, okay, maybe my current doing is not perfectly aligned, but it serves a greater purpose, because if I have done that, I will then be able to do this that I really want to do. And then carefully looking at, okay, how much time do I give myself to continue doing that thing? And at what point will I be doing that, what really my purpose is, right? And looking at like the pros and cons and upsides, downsides, and evaluating it carefully. And also then when transitioning out, not burn the bridges, because at least that's how it was for me. It was useful to not having burned all bridges, because then when I had clarity around new things I wanted to do, I could use some of the old bridges still. If I had burned them all and just like, disappeared from one day to another, that wouldn't be available. It's like that is, for example, certain contacts, networks, access to money, my reputation, for example, right? My reputation as an entrepreneur, also things that I had built went to shit and people lost money. I showed up and I tried to keep it together, and that gave me a certain reputation that I can still leverage to raise money today. So I just want to encourage people that, like, noticing that, to be careful. That's important.
I love that. And let me just jump on that, because one of the things I reflected on, because we haven't really like crystallized what is this idea of purpose, and perhaps we won't even get into an answer today. I mean, we had some interesting ideas around that before we even started rolling. But one of the things that I pondered on today as I was preparing for this is I don't actually believe our businesses or the ventures that we have are actually our exact expression of our purpose. It's more the vehicle
Yeah.
through which we're expressing the purpose, but
Agree.
they're not actually the purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it is important to just uncouple those two things and distinguish that, I mean, like as an example, I'm a coach, I'm a somatic practitioner, I run this podcast, and I would say those are all vehicles for me to express what my actual purpose is, but they're not the purpose itself. And I think it can be, perhaps that could be relieving, just to take that on as an understanding, and hold that a little bit more loosely, and also just recognize that it provides a little bit more playing room, that, of course, the more clarity that you then like get in terms of like what might be your deeper truth, like maybe it is, to liberate individuals to be more truthful or more playful or more loving in their lives. This could be one expression of your purpose. You can then redirect the vehicle of your business more geared towards that to actually start satiating or fulfilling on that purpose, right? So I don't think, I think that's some really wise advice in terms of not burning those bridges.
Very important to share that before we move on. Huh?
I love that. So let's dive into this. For anyone who's listening in who would want to start stepping into the second mountain, where would you want an individual to begin, and where would you recommend someone starts out?
I would generally, and depending on my level of awareness that I have, right, I might need someone to help me with that. So if I'm super self-aware, like, so need less help. If I'm, say, just starting into like building some practices to have awareness, then I might need a coach or someone to help me with that. But I really like checking in, like, okay, in what areas in life do I not feel peace? Peace is for me a strong indicator of like I am currently expressing my purpose. Then I'm generally, let's say, quite peaceful, even though things might be difficult. That's for me a good indicator. Like, where do I not feel peaceful? Where do I not feel ease? Where do I feel contracted? What is just a pure energy drain whenever I do it? And just investigate that very closely and see, okay, what is that? And usually, like, starting to dig there will lead me to some insights around, like, okay, I have, let's say, X amount of life force energy available that I can spend during daytime and, certain part of the night, and then I have to sleep. So, okay, if I investigate where do I put this energy, and where does it not feel like flow, that's a good place to start looking, I would say. Without saying that everything needs to be flow all the time. But that's a good place to start looking.
I love what you're communicating, and it was one of the things as well that stood out for me when I thought about this. And what it highlights for me is the importance, as we go on this path of embodiment, and actually learning to actually build a really clear relationship to our bodies, so we can get super clear around where are things off and where are things on. I mean, the things that you'd communicated around, where do I feel contracted or expansive? Where do I feel a certain aliveness, or where do I feel drained? Those are bodily responses. Yeah. But if we, and this is, I think, also an issue that founders can get themselves into, is if you're living most of your life completely disconnected from your body, you're not even aware of that, then that can get tricky, right?
Fair point. I would highly recommend to not try to solve this purpose challenge or like finding second mountain mind-based.
Please don't.
No, that's just not going. Yeah, I honestly I think
a lot of guys do that.
That's what a lot of people do actually.
Yes, it's so
The
true.
thing is that it's not going to work.
Yes.
And even if it works, quote unquote, that's going to be only a surface level of what would be available if you just dig deep enough. But the truth is in the fucking body. That's where it is. It's just there's no better guidance. If I don't start looking there, it will just be very painful.
That's a mic drop moment right there, man. I think that's super important for guys to know about. And again, like I think if someone feels disconnected or doesn't even know where to begin, I think it is very important to work with a facilitator who has an awareness of this, who can guide you into that and start supporting you and building that relationship towards your body, in a slow manner, right? Starting to connect them to breath practices, to movement practices, to sounding practices, towards mindfulness practices, awareness practices. All of that can be super useful to begin to draw more attention towards ourselves.
Agree. But yeah, then actually the first step is to check in with myself. Can I feel my body? And if I can't feel that, then that's the start. That's the first thing. Like without I don't even need to think about my fucking purpose. If I can't feel my body, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
it's true.
It's right, true, man.
So yeah, that's probably a starting point. So even earlier than what I had said, like that's a starting point.
That's good. I like that. And I guess also what can help in that, and a lot of individuals speak about that. I mean, David Data made that super popular, but this idea of like, hey, if you don't know your purpose, like go out in the mountains, go into a room and just sit with yourself until you actually find your purpose. For a lot of individuals, I find it's not that straightforward, but there is, I think, a truth and a depth that he's communicating to that, which is cut out all the noise, cut out the distractions, find a certain level of silence, and allow your body to slowly over time to communicate to you what might be here for you. Notice the reoccurring thoughts that arise. Notice the impulses that continue keeping your attention, that keep you busy in some ways, right? And those can offer pointers towards the things that might be meaningful to us. As an example, 3 years ago, there was a time when Pete, he started his podcast. And I noticed when he did, I was getting so noisy in my head about it. And I just couldn't drop the thought. And what it pointed out for me is like, this is really important to me. This is something that actually matters to me. And I took the next few months to really ponder on that. What is here? Why does this thought not leave me? And I think those can offer us a bit of an understanding. Another thing that as well comes up for me is that I feel like we've been, unfortunately, shared a lot of conditioning around this idea of purpose. And we've been offered this idea that one's purpose is this grandiose thing, and you have to go on this massive journey to find the golden key. And then all of a sudden, as soon as you put that golden key through the loophole and you open the door, it's like this magical world opens up to you and life is just effortless and, beyond any challenges. That's sometimes the sense I get in terms of the story that we're being offered around purpose. And I just don't see it as such.
Yeah, no, I think that's complete bullshit. And I would argue that the life that unfolds in the way that you have just described is a life with almost no purpose. Because that's in the end kind of like a wu-wei way of living, which is totally in flow. But that is without any fixated ideas, or that my purpose is to build this organization and whatever, ship 5 million products. That's a fixed idea, and that sooner or later will lead to suffering. That state that you describe is pretty much flow of life what in Buddhist terms is or whatever, Wu Wei living.
What I want to add on that here is I want men listening here to soften back on the ideas that they might have been taught and actually look at what's right in front of you. What's right in front of you that is demanding your attention? What is asking to be worked on? And truthfully, you might actually not like the step that's right in front of you. Perhaps you notice the step that's right in front of you is the heartbreak that you're experiencing as a result of the breakup that you just had. Perhaps it's the challenges that you've had with your father your whole life that is constantly demanding your attention, and you're constantly trying to prove yourself to him or not be like him. Yeah. Maybe it's the ways that you feel self-conscious and you don't actually give yourself the permission just to be who you are, just to be transparent, to be authentic, to be real, and bury yourself with the world because you're so afraid of what other people think of you. I think it's important for men to actually look at what's here, what's right in front of me. And I would argue if we can actually direct our attention towards that, if we don't seek to jump steps, if we don't try to take the 20th step before we take the first step, there is an unfolding process that occurs. And taking that step that we might not want to take offers us some insight about the step that might follow. And there is an ongoing process from that. And if you just watch that over a timeline of a few weeks, a few months, perhaps years, you will see that there is a progression. You will actually see there's a path that is forming itself here. Yeah, that is in some ways uncertain and in some ways unclear. The analogy that I like to give is, imagine a car driving in the middle of the night, and all you see is the 10, 20, 30 meters ahead of you. But the more you continue on that path, the light presents the path to you that you got to take. And I kind of see this idea around purpose in a similar manner. Anything you want to add?
And that made a lot of sense to me, actually.
Yeah.
Can really resonate with that.
Let me feel into if there's anything else that I would, I guess, want to add. Being mindful as well of dropping any numbing agents, any distractions that keep us busy. Also recognizing that this type of work very much demands us to be in relationship. Relationship with individuals that know us very closely, that can perhaps reflect back to us our innate gifts, the things that move them about us. If we just listen closely to them, and if we're just willing to hear who they see us, it will offer pointers towards who we really are, our gifts. And this is something that has incredibly supported me over the years, to receive reflections from my friends, to receive reflections from mentors, teachers that saw something in me. And I would take those things on, and I would learn to work with them. I would try them on for size and then see what would happen if I were to just amplify that or expand that. And then notice as well, of course, how I feel as I take that on. Last thing I'll say as well to that is, and this is also where I really encourage individuals to do this work alongside someone. But allowing a disintegration of the identity that you might have previously built, that's a really important one. That's probably the most important one. to actually allow yourself to go through a process of stepping out of that, so something new can actually really be birthed. I'm sure you can as well share about your personal experiences around that. And I would actually like to hear, what was that like for you to step out of the frames that you had as well, condition yourself in. Like one of the things that you spoke about a few days ago, I believe, was the fact that within your old identity, you needed to be needed. That's just one example of how this showed up for you. But I'm curious, how did you step out of that identity that you had built so something truer and something more deep, something more authentic could actually present itself?
Yeah, that's a big topic, man. I don't know if it's fair to say that it wasn't that hard for me. Maybe, okay, what I would say is that up until a certain point, life felt to me like a TV show. So I was like a bit like, this is a movie somehow. It had these moments sometimes. It's like, it's not even real. It is real at the same time, but it's not even real. And yeah, I once had like an experience that helped me to look through that illusion. And that made me really curious, okay, what else is there in life? And somehow that had helped me to, and I'm not saying I always have access to it, but it somehow had helped me to shift my identity from, let's say, 100% based in, okay, this is, the company I'm building, this is my partner, this is the life I'm living, this is my car, this is my house, blah, blah, blah. This is my friends, to this being only 90% and then 10% being something that just bigger than all of that. And that opened the door. And based on that, I also had then a development where I really started to I really wanted to let go of that identity at some point. So then the big step, for example, to do that was like, basically sharing public about, the stuff that I had done behind closed curtains that no one knew about. So that was definitely, shredding my image publicly so that no one would have like this perception of me that people had at that point.
And as I know you as well, you find something exhilarating in that.
Man, I love it. It's pure freedom. Or for example, just recently, like I put myself through that 7 weeks breathwork container, and that was definitely destroying the image of, like, let's say I have a strong, I always carry a strong self-image of me being very competent in whatever I do. And I felt for the past 6 weeks, I felt fucking incompetent. Like just this morning, it's like, what the fuck, man? I'm just completely incompetent. And I'm sitting there 8 hours a day feeling completely incompetent. And I wouldn't have to do that, man. I don't need to feel incompetent for like, now what is it? 6 times 7, 42 days of feeling incompetent, 8 to 10 hours a day, But it really destroys, once again, a self-image that I was holding. So there's some incredible liberation in destroying self-images. And I mean, I would love to say that I'm done with creating self-image. That's not true. Like the moment I shredded one, another one is being created. It's just a constant process that I'm not even responsible for. It just happens, right? But yeah, and it's just incredibly liberating to let go of these things.
I agree, and I believe that's an absolute nugget for anyone who's listening in to reflect on and to ponder on, because I see that we often defend our self-images for dear fucking life. It's like, I will not fucking let go. I will hold on to this thing no matter what. And I see to myself as well, right? And the more I do, the more I suffer, right? And I think you building that relationship to your self-images, and I would argue it probably it's probably as a consequence of your deep spiritual practice, which probably as well points to the fact that, if we want to as well create a little bit more ease in that, it can be useful to develop a certain relationship towards that, and have a look at that. Who am I beyond all these structures I've created? Who am I beyond the roles, the masks, the personas, the identity? What is the deeper thing that's here? And holding those things loosely, because as you said, we're always going to be those things to some regard, or like portray those,
and they're useful. Yeah. They're very useful to operate in the world. And there's a saying, I think it's used with a lot by, I think it's the founder, or at least the community of Y Combinator, which is like a very important accelerator in the US, like the most famous accelerator in the US. And they say like strong opinions loosely held. And that's exactly the same applies to self-images. It's good to have one. It helps to operate in the world. It defines who I am. People can, like, if I'm completely self-image less, then how do one want to relate with me? Because I'm nothingness, so that doesn't work, right? So I need to have it. It helps me to operate. Then when it gets in the way of, let's say, what truly serves me and what my purpose is, then I have to let go of it immediately, ideally. And the funny thing is, just as a side comment here, but even the idea of letting go of self-images it can be a self-image. Oh, yeah. My self-image is that I'm always letting go of self-images. So the funny thing, there's no escaping of that. And there definitely is a deeper truth for everyone to be discovered through spiritual practice that helps big time in that self-image, dealing with self-images. And it is our human mind and nature is built to create these.
I want to offer listeners perhaps a glimpse towards what it could look like to build one second mountain, to climb one second mountain. And, I would argue that both you and I are individuals who are climbing that. And of course, sometimes we might fall into the mechanisms of that first mountain. I think that's quite natural. And, we have to watch out when those old mechanisms want to be kicked in for that. But I believe what could be useful is to offer frames loosely held for those listening in that might give out them an understanding of what to look for or what might be important there. As an example, one of the things that I've observed in myself, and seems to be an ongoing pattern for those individuals who seem to be on a deeper path of service, of contribution, it seems that the doorway in for them was their pain. It was the things that they had experienced that led to some of their deepest wounds.
Yeah.
That they're now, through having transformed those in their lives or continuing to transform those in their lives, now starting to support other individuals who might be in a similar experience. As an example, for me, my biggest wounds were around relationships, absence of connection, but also I'm going to say the absence or the disconnect with my own father, right? And as a result as well, as an extension, my perception of masculinity, what it means to be a man, those were two really big wounds in my life that I've really needed to alchemize. And I would say it was through my process of doing that I then wanted to support other individuals in that. This is why I love talking about relationships. This is why I love talking about the challenges of men and supporting other men on their path, because I know on a visceral level how painful it can be to suffer in those places. And I wouldn't want other men to suffer in that. I like the idea that if we look at the word passion, the etymology of the word, the root of the word actually means to suffer. So the question is, what is it that you're willing to suffer for? And so that is, one, I guess, pointer that I believe can offer listeners something to work with. What is a pain that you might have experienced? What is a wound that you might have experienced that you're willing to be a stand for, that you experience compassion for, because you can then see it in other people and it moves you and it says something. It suggests to you, hey, I don't want other people to suffer in this way. Those can be really good pointers.
It's definitely true for me, yeah, clearly. Yeah.
Would you say there's other things that stand out for you? Other things that you believe could offer pointers?
Yeah, definitely a discovery of okay, what's my deepest gift? So I definitely started to feel into mine, and would say I have quite some clarity around that.
Would you want to share that here?
Yeah, so I would mention, like, obviously it's a group. Let's say there are multiple things, but a few like really stand out to me. And I think one thing that I can transmit is, like, as we noticed earlier in the conversation, I even if I fail, I have a high sense of self-worth. Like, I felt incompetent for 6 weeks. I still believe I'm, pretty good at what I'm doing. Also, I know that I'm a total beginner and I have no fucking idea what I'm doing there, but I feel like I'm solid, and I can see that I'm surrounded by people who are much better with that. And then I've had situations where I was able to transmit to people that they are like, there's nothing to prove about their value. And there's like, they're perfect as they are, and there's always room for improvement. Both is true. I can always learn something new. I can always learn a new skill. I can train in something, and it says ultimately nothing about my value, myself. Right? So that's something that I can definitely. I've had situations where I was able to transmit, and I see that as a gift that I can transmit. Another one is that I'm pretty good in seeing uncertainty, being with uncertainty, and like tons of options and possibilities, and then finding clarity in it, and like bringing it down to like actionable things that one can then go and do. So for example, I'm extremely comfortable with uncertainty, and that's a gift that I can give. Something that comes more from a wound is, and I've only discovered that recently, that I have a strong commitment to be with people no matter what they do. I mean, if someone goes and kills someone, that's maybe a conversation we have to have. But let's say, in terms of what path they choose, and the number of fuck-ups they have on that path, and the experiences they have, and the emotions that they feel, and the decisions that they take, I'm there with them. That's something that I want to transmit. Like, even in my investments, I do that. I give people money, say, like, I'm right here with you, even if you fuck up. And this is in a way an like unconditional way of making investments. And it's, for me, really coming from a place of love for, people close to me. And that's an experience I want, because I experienced lots of, let's say, conditional support and conditional love. Yeah. And I want to give people the experience of like, I'm right there with them, even if they completely ignore my advice and fuck it up, I'll still be there.
There's something here for me in the sense that, in this beautiful example that you'd shared around the fact that I perceive that the second mountain has a lot to do more around relationships, whereas this first mountain can be a little bit more me-centric.
Yeah.
It's more around what can I gain out of this versus what do I want to give? What do I want to give out of my overflow, out of my love?
Yeah. Yeah.
Out of my contribution, out of my compassion. So I think there's something really big here.
Yeah.
Around that.
Yeah.
Another thing as well that just stands out for me is this idea that, I don't know how you relate to it, but it's not easy, in the sense that I almost have a sense that first journey is about building an identity, whereas like the second mountain is about completely like removing it or dissolving the identity in some ways. And this is where we're going to get a little bit woo-woo, but it's actually about coming into a more deeper, more wider understanding of who we really are. And within that, I see that a lot of that second mountain will probably be connected to facing some of our deepest fears. Like as an example is public humiliation, because I've been bullied, and not being good enough. The things that you're super good at are my weaknesses. So it's so funny that we're actually connected.
And it makes sense at the same time.
Of course. Yeah. But, here I am in a fucking podcast studio, like, creating a podcast where like thousands of people listen. Public humiliation, being canceled, being excommunicated, biggest fears. Here I am fucking leaning in, but there's nothing more thrilling. Yeah. And I see it with so many individuals that there's a cost that it almost is a little bit there, because it requires them to dissolve the small mind for the big mind.
Yeah, I love that.
I feel two key points, and again, I probably want to refrain from like even trying to get a definition of what purpose is. It's probably not as useful, but just offering a conversation around it and maybe offering different pointers from different directions is probably going to be a lot more valuable. And two things that I had considered were super powerful for me was building, first of all, a very intimate relationship with death. Death is something that we've explored before, but for the sake of this conversation could be useful to bring back in. But also this idea of legacy. And I think something I pondered on, and would love to hear your thoughts on this, but as I see it, as I observe it, a lot of individuals, when we're more on this like achievement front or trying to get validation, it's almost like we're trying to like leave this big fucking legacy behind that lives like with us after we die. It's almost like the part of us that doesn't want to die is like, I want to continue on like this, and I've pondered on this idea of legacy, and what feels most true for me right now is looking at how am I living in my day to day? How am I showing up? Who will people remember me as when I leave? And so that's something that always stays with me. The impact that I have with people, who I'm being. I ponder on this idea a lot. What do I want to be remembered for? And it's not so much about trying to get their validation or their approval, but it's more around my dedication towards wanting to make the world a better place or leaving other individuals better off than I found them. There was something about that moves me to show up a certain way. Does that all make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It definitely makes sense. And I'm completely different. So I love the death topic that is I have explored for myself very closely, and it's something that I'm still, it's going to be lifelong practice, like death practice, lifelong practice, until we finally encounter it. And so, by the way, it's like also like our choice if we like do the work now or then do it shortly before we die. So you can just, it's up to us. Recommend to do some work before, makes it easier. So like death practice is great. It also brings me
Let's speak more about that.
More into the present moment. It adds peace to my life.
It sharpens us.
It definitely sharpens me 100%. And especially sometimes when like life feels too intense for me, and then I know that it's gonna end. That gives me peace. And there's also something, it's hard to describe it, but like encountering death, like for example, I did some work in hospice and I went deeper into the topic. It's like, ironically, it helps me to connect with something that is deeper than, a part that maybe was never born, never dies, and is still here. I think we spoke about that already. So anyway, so I think tons of benefits around the death practice. And with regard to legacy, I personally can't connect to legacy. I also want to say that I, there's no part of me that wants to have children. Yeah. That probably is connected. I give a fuck about legacy. I really don't care. And I for me, the only use I see in thinking about legacy is like what quality do I want to have in my interactions now, like the interaction we're having right now and the interaction I'm going to have with my partner over dinner and like tomorrow with the other people in the container, like directing me more towards the present moment. And
I think that's what I was trying to point.
How am I showing up right now?
Yes.
And let that then, let's say, I like to think about it in a way of like, whatever I bring through in a present moment, whatever qualities I demonstrate, creates a certain momentum. One could call it karma if you want to. So karma is momentum, and that then will define whatever the legacy is going to be. What I'm not buying into, and where I have I had these conversations many times with, let's say, other entrepreneurs that like are successful in, building these empires, to let's say, yeah, that is how I want to be remembered and have created this, that, and the other assets. And I can't connect to that. For me, this is all bullshit. And everyone is, everyone can do whatever they want. I think it's very, for me, very shallow, very, very like not interesting to me. But like what you said, right? Like, let that question help me decide how I want to show up right now with someone, what quality of my relationships. That's where I found it extremely helpful.
Beautiful.
Like, just imagine, sorry, I get a bit excited about that topic, but just imagine, I found that a very interesting exploration. What if any conversation I have during a day will be the last time I spoke to that person?
I was just going to bring that there.
I love it.
Let's go, man.
What will that do to the depth of my interaction? Have I shared everything I wanted to share? Have I felt the heart of the other person? Have I opened my own heart to the other person, right? And if I just, and to be honest, like, it's most difficult when I speak with my mother, for example. I'm like, what if that's the last time we spoke? And I'm like, oh shit, there would be so many things, and I can't bring it out, right? So I'm not claiming that I'm always able to pull that off, but I find an extremely useful practice, and sometimes I do it, and I notice there's a shift in the quality and the depth of my connections and conversations if I felt into that and then went into it, or if I'm just casually running into a conversation.
100%, man. I mean, this is something that's so important for me, because I know the moments when I step into that and the richness that comes out of it. The ways that I even surprise myself in the way that I show up, it's just indescribable. And I guess where I would like to leave it with this thought is this idea that each moment can be purposeful.
Yeah, I love that. 100%.
Each moment can be purposeful.
Yeah.
The question is, how intentional are you with this moment?
Yeah.
With the energy, with the quality that you're bringing into this experience here right now. That very question that you had posed around, how would I act? How would I speak? How would I love my partner? How would I be with my parents if this was my last fucking day? It aligns us, it sharpens us to what is really necessary, to what is really needed. And I consider how, when I see my parents, over the last, I'm going to say, decade, I've seen them once a year usually. That's the frequency. And it's like, usually I'm there for a few weeks. And I consider like 80% of it is like fucking horseshit around the quality. But then those last 2 to 3 days, something in me kicks in and then says, Alex, this might be your last time. You don't know. I pray it's not, but it might be. What needs to be said? What needs to be shared? What needs to be shown? What needs to be felt? What do I need to receive in them? And not fucking hold back. Not hold one single bit back. I think that as a pointer can give us the closest that I can provide here in this conversation towards finding one's purpose. All right, brother. We're going to be closing it off in the next minute or so. Is there anything else that you would like to leave on the table here for the guys who had ambitiously listened to this 5-part series?
No, that feels really complete.
Yeah.
I think no, all on purpose. That is, I really I love what you said towards the end. The purpose is unfolding in every moment, and it comes down to the intention and the quality with which we live that moment and build our relationships.
Well, I just want to close it off by saying thank you, man. By saying thank you for being willing to go on this journey here with me over the last 6 weeks has it been now?
Yeah.
Through all your incompetence that you've been experiencing. And, maybe to give some context as well for the listeners, I shared the fact that I felt somewhat dissatisfied because I was feeling like I'm just a fellow podcast host who is just bringing the next hit guest on the podcast and getting psyched up about that. And I was like starting to get deflated about that because I was realizing this is me. I'm not just a podcast host. There's more to me. I'm a coach. I'm a somatic practitioner. I help people in these ways. And I almost feel like I hid behind the shadows. And I'd shared that with you. And you were willing to come on board, for the series that I wanted to create. And I just want to tell you, man, like there's no other individuals that I could think of that I would entrust as a podcast host, podcast host for this podcast, which is my baby. So, I want to say thank you, man. And
thank you.
Just say how much I love you, man.
Thank you, man. It's been an honor.
Yeah. Cool. Well, listeners, I hope you got a lot of value out of this podcast series. As you'll as well discover, Bjoern and I, we're going to create an offering out of this. So I really encourage you as well to check this one out. We'd love to have you. We'd love to support you on your path. And we'd love to as well build a community around this. As always, if you feel that another listener might find value of this, feel free to pay it forward. And until next time, signing out. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.